That's 50 there, you want $50, 40, 30, one of it, $10. The suitcase is worth that. 10, thank you, ma'am. And now 20, one of it, $20. At 20, at 10, bid 20, I'll take 12.
Donald Jesse Haug, warrant officer, 2nd class, 407 Squadron. Known to his friends as Rusty. Missing in action November 10th, 1943. Age 24. Rusty Haug was one of the over 15,000 men and women of the Royal Canadian Air Force who died in World War II. Like many of them, his body was never found. It rests at sea. All that is left of his short life is an inscription on a war memorial and his suitcase, sold at an auction for $16. It contained the details of his life, and this is his story of a young prairie boy who never made it back.
His story starts here, on the Canadian prairies, in Regina, Canada. It's 1924. Rusty's father runs a small implement and car dealership in Regina. He has 2 brothers, one older, one younger. Big brother John is always hovering, protective. The youngest is Innes. Everyone calls him Egg, the family cut-up, the family favorite. Rusty also has a sister, Helen, tall and pretty. When Rusty is 8, his family moves from their lower middle-class neighborhood to a more upscale area near the Saskatchewan Legislative Building. Helen and Rusty work for their father in the implement business. In 1940, the Depression catches up to Hogue Implements. The family address changes to the less affluent Empress Street in the west end of the city. It's here that the last picture is taken of Rusty's father. Helen and Rusty find jobs elsewhere. Helen with Imperial Oil, and Rusty joins the Bank of Commerce in Balgony, a small town 15 miles from Regina. If you lived on the Canadian prairies in the 30s, all you could hope for were clouds. But the cloud that came in 1939 held no rain.
Rusty Haug enlists as soon as he is old enough in August of 1941.
My father was dead when Donald joined the service. I think it was upsetting to my mother, but he thought out what he did. He didn't just jump into it. He probably thought quite a bit before he actually joined the services too, I would say. Thought about it a bit because he was a thinker. He wasn't a sudden mover.
He just felt you had to do it. Everybody was doing it, and he didn't want to be left out. He wanted to get in and see what it was all about. And I guess Rusty was the same.
Gee, what, those are great, exciting days for us. Although most of the boys in my hometown went in the Army. Most of the boys that I had as chums went in the Air Force.
And of course, the war was going to be over in no time. It wasn't going to last all this long time that it did. It kept accelerating and getting worse and worse.
The first stop for the new recruit was Manning Depot in Edmonton.
And Rusty and I, incidentally, were in the same barrack block. I got to know him particularly well because from time to time they need some people to do kitchen fatigue. And Rusty and I were on for 1 week in the evenings, up to about midnight, I guess it was. And I can still recall this. You had to prepare 2 barrels of potatoes each night. And then you had another barrel of some vegetables, say carrots or whatever it was. So we got to know each other quite well at that time. He was a real nice, decent fellow. He's quite buoyant, you know, not gregarious or anything, but just a nice fellow. Nice to be with. Rusty naturally had rusty hair, and he had freckles, an easy smile. He's a well-liked chap, very well-liked.
After his initial training, the next stop for the young recruit is the Elementary Flying Training School in Regina, right across the street from the family home.
We did our initial training together, and it was during the wintertime, actually. And we played hockey, I think against the Central Collegiate boys. We weren't very good because we'd been away from that, but Rusty, I can remember, he looked pretty good on the ice. Real good shape, no doubt about that.
There are 67 recruits in Rusty's class. About half are Americans, half Canadians. Fred Raymond is from Viking, Alberta. He will be shot down and will spend 2 years in a POW camp near Peenemünde. Jim Lynn from Vancouver won't be so lucky. During a raid on Magdeburg in January 1944, he will be killed in action.
Andy Johnson's a Saskatchewan farm boy. He will be killed less than 2 months before the end of the war while flying on operations.
Sid Side is an American. He'll win the Distinguished Flying Cross and be the subject of one of the funniest and most honest books about flying in World War II. Bill Skoropad from Vegreville will go to the West Coast to fly anti-sub patrols. On one of those patrols, he mistakes a gray whale for a Japanese sub and blows it to Kingdom Come. Stan Shepard will become an air gunner with the 408. He'll survive 32 missions and marry a girl from England.
Rusty Haug goes on to further pilot training, this time learning to fly the Tiger Moth.
It's here that the young recruits fulfill their dream, to show what they're made of, to prove that they can be pilots at all by flying solo.
Well, I'll tell you, first solo flight, it was really something I don't think you'll ever forget. I think they take off around 40, 50 miles an hour. But the minute you open the throttle, the torque of the propeller wants to turn the aircraft toward the pull of the propeller, and you get the tail up in the air as fast as you can so that you got control of it with the rudders.
And away you go, and then you make your left-hand turn and come downwind. And of course, you have to watch the windsock, and then make another left-hand turn and come into land. And then coming in from there down, then it hits on the 2 little wheels, and there's a little skidder at the back. Boy, that's quite a thrill. I made it. Yep.
The early training patrols are exciting for the young recruits and very dangerous. Many of them will die before ever seeing combat.
Herman Kleinau is a Chicago boy. On April 30th, 1942, during a gliding approach, his Tiger Moth goes into a spin and crashes. Herman is killed.
The day after the crash, Donald Rusty Haug climbs aboard his Tiger Moth and makes his first solo flight. Over the next few months, Rusty puts in another 100 hours and is promoted to sergeant pilot. In October 1942, he gets a month's leave and goes home. The Haug family takes their young pilot to church, where he is confirmed. His new life is just beginning.
New York City. For a young country boy from Saskatchewan on leave, it is the trip of a lifetime, like being in a dream.
We took a trip up the Empire State Building. It's 110 stories tall. The first elevator took us up to the 86th floor in 58 seconds. We ate lunch and had cocktails on the 102nd floor and also visited the last stories up to 108. It sure is a large building.
He wrote the most amazing things that he had seen in New York. So as a young person, I would say it was one of the highlights of his entire life. Maybe more so than even going overseas. It was a great send-off.
Met Dick Alcott at Sons of Fun, so decided to spend the evening with him. We ended up at the Havana, Madrid. We had our picture taken, so I'll send it to you. It's really not too bad, and believe me, it's not water in those glasses. The day before, we were at Jack Dempsey's bar, and I saw him and got his autograph.
As you go through life, there are certain parts in everybody's life that are great. I would say it was one of the highlights of his life.
After leaving New York, he is sent to the #1 General Reconnaissance School in Summerside, Prince Edward Island, where his training is intensified. Here, for the first time, young pilots like Rusty train for what they are intended to do: fly over open water. He also trains in the use of a newly invented radar system known as ASV, Air-to-Surface Vessel, the latest in U-boat detection.
GRS is a good course. We do all our navigation over the sea. No landmarks to fix position or anything like that. We fly out to sea for about 100, 150 miles and then back to a different place, and it's really interesting.
There you learned how to navigate over the water. You don't have any landmarks, of course, and so you were relying on what they call dead reckoning navigation. That is really where we learned how to navigate.
Rusty and his fellow pilots now know that they'll be in the Coastal Command, hunting German U-boats.
We graduate from here on January 16th, and then I can't say for sure. Maybe the Bahamas or overseas or OTU in Nova Scotia. I kind of hope it's the Bahamas.
Rusty gets his call overseas. He's sent home for a 2-week leave.
When I went home on my first so-called embarkation leave, I don't recall any conversation at home that concerned what I was actually going to be doing and the dangers I might encounter, or anybody saying, now be careful. I don't recall anything like that.
This is Rusty Hoag's final leave in Regina. At the railway station, the family gathers to say goodbye to the young flyer as he begins a journey that will take him across an ocean to a new life. They will never see him again.
February 26, 1943. Well, here I am at the Y in London. Got over okay and quickly, too. I'll be posted soon, so stay tuned.
Rusty Haug lands in London, England. He leaves the boy Donald far behind. He is a man now, a pilot, and this is a whole new world, a whole new life.
Rusty is posted to the 407 Squadron, known as the Demons. He is sent to Shivner Air Base near a small English town called Barnstable.
The part of the country I'm in now is really beautiful. Everything is so neat and compact. Lovely green hedges along the roads, the grass is very thick and green, and the beaches are very nice with the tides coming and going 2 or 3 times a day. From the air, the whole countryside just looks like a big patchwork quilt, with roads winding in and out. When the war is over, I only hope you all get a chance to see what I've seen. The people, when you get to know them, just can't be beat.
The airfield at Shivner was situated more or less on an estuary. It almost looked to me like it might have been a floodplain of a river that went through Barnstable. And it was actually a beautiful base to fly into because there were no hills approaching from in your way coming in from the ocean, from the bay.
In 1943, the average life of a bomber crew is less than 10 operations. It's something that airmen rarely talk about.
When I first went over, I didn't know about the extent of casualties, and there weren't that many at that time, really. The war hadn't been really going that long as far as the Air Force is concerned, except in Britain, the Spitfires and the like, the Battle of Britain. But the Bomber Command weren't doing very much, Coastal Command weren't doing very much. It wasn't until the war accelerated after that that the things started to get a little more dicey.
In the beginning, the 407 Squadron is a coastal strike unit responsible for low-level strikes against merchant vessels along the Dutch coast up to Germany.
And they'd often have an escort, a gunboat of some sort, and then they started flying balloons at night, and no way you could determine that. So they tried raising us up to 4,000 feet, but the accuracy, you don't get any accuracy really at night. So they decided to take Hudsons off that type of work and put them on anti-sub. And shortly after that, we switched to Wellingtons.
The men who fly the Wellington Mark 14 call it the Wimpy, after Popeye's hamburger-eating friend. It is a peculiar plane, geodesic in design with a wide wingspan and covered with fabric. But it was an excellent aircraft for anti-submarine strikes, stable, maneuverable, with the ability to fly as low as 100 feet above the water.
I remember a couple of instances where fellows were killed on training missions and they recovered their bodies, and we had to have a funeral for them. Near Shivner, there is a church up on one of the hills there, and we used to have a slow march, funeral march, all the way up on that hill with the deceased, and that was pretty touching, pretty touching.
In air crew, we got every 6-week leave. And we were provided with a rail pass. You could go anywhere in Britain on a rail pass. And majority of the fellows headed straight for London.
Many of the guys would say, well, if they happened to go through London where they were going, that's usually about as far as they got, because London It was a pretty exciting place. There's lots of nice places to eat there and lots of parties, lots of girls.
And it was on one of these leaves that Rusty met the woman of his dreams and fell in love.
I came down the stairs, and below, standing alone and looking into the distance, was Donald. I waited to see whether he was accompanied, and then I walked down and approached him direct from the ballroom floor. The band was very loud behind us, but I went up and said, "May I have the pleasure of this dance, please?" And then he saw me and inquired what I said, rather like, "What did you say?" And I repeated, "Would you like to dance?" And, "Oh, yes, yes."
I think they were very much in love. They went to dances, they visited her people, and they went on every leave he ever had. He never missed a time with her.
I thought he was high quality and a very nice, strong personality. He had very alert blue eyes, a sense of humor.
I went down to the show in town last night. The Last of the Mohicans was the attraction, and I thought it was very good. Of course, I took Christine with me, a very nice girl. As a matter of fact, she likes to pay part of the time, so I consent once in a while.
I suppose I introduced him to the routines of England as it was in wartime, and he would tell me about things about Canada and different names for things, you know, so we always found something interesting to talk about. And then when we went home, he was quite happy to just sort of be there and just sit around and join in with whatever was happening. We went walking on this road and beyond here, and he took photographs here on the bridge of myself, and I took some of him. I asked whether he'd like to go see some of the coastal resorts, particularly Bude, which was quite delightful and very popular before the war. He said, "Oh no, I prefer not to go by the sea, thank you. I don't want to go by the sea at all." He didn't want to go to the sea because he had, you know, that was what he did regularly.
I have taken some snaps of myself and Christine, and you can see for yourself just what is what. Sometimes, I just pull out all the photos you've sent me and have a look at the old hometown and the people that live there. You know, it really calms me down, and I feel better again.
I'm sure that she and my brother would have married. See, my brother didn't have any love life over here that I knew of, even when he was in the forces, and as much as I can remember, he never went with any girls. He was more the reserved type. I guess he was waiting for the right one to come along.
I was talking about certain plans, you know, just casual ones that would continue on from that time. And suddenly he said, I think we're on our way home, he said, "Hey, wait a minute." He said, "I don't know about that." He said, "I might want to marry you." Of course, he said, you know, to get married whilst I'm still flying wouldn't be really fair. You'd be left with a wedding ring. So he really was very happy here, and I think it shows in the photographs that we took at that time. But of course we had no idea that within a few months things would be so dramatically changed.
For many crews, another challenge was keeping alert. Flying for long hours, only a few hundred feet above the water in the dead of night, was a dangerous combination for any pilot.
we just flew in terrible weather. You know, we take off and the cloud base is 500 feet and we get into the clouds and we'd be flying there for 10 hours. All we'd be looking at are our instruments. And we were flying through rain. Water was dripping down on you all the time. This is one of the reasons why really I've never flown since the war, is because we just had to fly in the worst weather.
Your main problem with anti-sub was engine failure, running out of gas, winds change or something, and you have got enough gas to get back. There was some chance of getting shot down. Every trip, really, you wondered whether you'd come back.
Some may have just fallen asleep, and when they had their shift on the controls, and in you went. And I can remember one night very, very clearly, and I had the controls, and I must have dozed off, because the first thing I hear is, "Skipper, how high are we?" I took it out of there real quick and pulled back.
When you're flying at night and you go in to investigate a contact, whether it's a submarine or whatever it is, if the sea is flat and calm, at 500 feet, you can't tell whether you're at 500 feet or 50 feet. And as they fly down the searchlight, I think a lot of them just maybe flew right into the ocean.
He didn't express fear, but he did speak to me in particular on one occasion at Barnstable. It was a lovely evening in late summer, and we sat down on the seat there in the square, and he said, "Now, should I be missing at any time, I don't want you to give up hope for at least a few weeks."
Letters to and from home became a great source of comfort for the young Canadian pilot.
I'm getting a little flying in now as second pilot. There's not much I can say about that. My letters can't even say that the weather is fine, as any news about the weather is supposed to be kept secret. Say hello to all the folks in Regina. Give my love to Graham, and my moral support to John and his chicken coop, Helen on her tennis, Ig on his golf and girls, and you have my support on keeping them all in one piece. I know you want details about my flying, but really all I can say is that I now have about twice as many hours as when I left, but under a little different conditions, if you get what I mean. You and Helen are getting a lot of exercise these days on those new bikes. Keep it up, as it can't hurt. I don't suppose I'll know you when I get home. You will probably look like some movie actress, all skin and bones. I don't think I can really write a half-decent letter anymore. I don't know whether it's because we can't say much or what. I just can't seem to write what I want, and it makes the whole process kind of useless. Has there been much hunting this season or not? I suppose by the time the war is over, I'll get back and there'll be so many ducks, they'll be doing the hunting instead of us. I got back from leave about a week ago. Had a very nice time. I just moved into town, got a hotel room, and rested up. That, and seeing Christine every day, made it one of my best leaves yet.
It was a very serious time. Without wondering whether they were going to be missing, you did know anything could happen every time they flew on operations. But of course, he had a very strong feeling that something was going to go wrong. I tried to look on the bright side and say that, probably things would go along all right. And he saw I was concerned, so he said, "Don't worry," he said, "I'll get back if I can." But he somehow had a feeling that we were later to discover that if he was in danger, it would be over the water.
Well, Cook, old girl, keep plugging along and keep things intact until I get back and give you a hand. P.S. I'm enclosing a photo of our crew.
On the day after his 24th mission, Rusty Hogue writes a letter to his brother John. It's the last letter he'll ever write. The date? November 7th, 1943. And Rusty has flown nearly 200 hours of night operations hunting for German U-boats.
Dear John, just received your letter today, dated October 14th, and was sure glad to hear from you. You really don't know what it means to get letters from you all back home, even though it's just about the number of eggs you got on a certain day. Sorry I can't say much about my work, but I'm getting on pretty well. Lots of flying anyways. But what the heck, I'll be on leave again around the 1st of December. Looks like I'll be working over Christmas and New Year's. Oh joy. Well, Johnny, I guess that's about all for now. Say hello to anyone you see that I know and write again soon. Best of love, Dawn.
The night of November 9th, 1943. Rusty and the rest of the crew take off in Wellington aircraft number HF-182. Code letter T. Rusty's plane does not return on schedule, and the log entry is made.
If one of the crews was overdue, of course we'd wait around until he came in. And I remember 2 different instances. One of the boys, his crew didn't come back. And they never heard anything. Just took off, and that was it. And that happened to so many crews. They would go out and they just wouldn't come back.
It is my painful duty to confirm the telegram recently received. This does not necessarily mean that your son has been killed or wounded. He may have landed in enemy territory and might be a prisoner of war.
It was a telegram she got. She just couldn't believe it. That it actually had, well, I think nobody ever thinks it can happen to you.
There was this overwhelming feeling of foreboding, and I had to sit down and I thought, what's happened? I felt I was looking into an abyss because I was still determined to sort of keep to hope, to think that everything was going to be all right.
This morning I sat with 3 of his friends in the crew room and talked about him, and the nice things they said about him would have warmed your heart. This unhappy incident has come as a terrible blow to the squadron.
But I guess other people had the same thing happen to them. And I don't know, it's just as though your whole world has fallen apart, that a part of you is gone too. And you're just an empty feeling. That's the best way I can describe it. And I know my mother was absolutely heartbroken.
Oh, she was deeply upset because she wrote to me then, and I could tell her so little. And then she sent me his photograph that he'd taken when he won his wings. And I had that framed immediately.
Warrant Officer, 2nd Class, D.J. Hogue, RCAF, died in his country's service, 10 November 1943.
My mother always wanted Christine, after Donald was lost, to come over to Canada, but she never did. But to this day, she just still raves about him. So it had to be a a one-time thing with her. That when you think of all these years that she never really married anyone else or became enamored of anyone else that I know of.
But his mother hoped that I would go back there when things had settled after the war. But I didn't really feel I could go without him.
A life ends, but life goes on. Helen's husband, Tom, comes home from the war. John continues to raise chickens. Graham travels to England to visit Runnymede. Ig and his wife, Christine, have a newborn son. They name him Donald.
The hardest part of the war was the fact that you knew that some of the fellows that you were friendly with, did things with, went on leave with, would be gone. That we weren't all going to be around at the end. You didn't figure you were going to be one yourself, but you knew very well that some of the guys you were having great times with would be gone.
I don't know whether I should admit this, but not just a year after, 2 years after, but maybe in time more years than that, since the war, over 50 years now, you do get some bad dreams, you know, about the whole thing. Just thinking about a lot of the guys that just never come back.
I lost my brother in Bomber Command in February of 1945, right near the end of the war. Yeah, he was only 18 and a half. I was just, last couple months ago, I was just over in Germany to visit the cemetery in Germany where he was buried. And that's the thing that really struck me when I looked at the stones and saw the ages, 18 and a half. One of the other boys in his crew was 19. Another boy is 23. I think the pilot was 29. I'm 74 now. And you know, 20 seems to be awful young. Yeah.
As one of my friends said once, he said, I wouldn't miss it for $1 million, but I wouldn't do it again for 10 million. And probably Rusty would feel the same way. It's not that we thought war was wonderful. It really wasn't wonderful. You did it, and I hope there's never another one. I would have liked to have seen him after the war, of course. We would have been great friends, and we could have been, if he's still alive all this time, we'd still be great friends, you know, when we got together and with our families. But that wasn't to be. Yeah.
Rusty Haug's body was never found. His name is etched on a tablet on the Runnymede War Memorial, dedicated to the 20,000 Commonwealth Air Force personnel who perished in the war and have no known grave. In Plymouth, not far from where Rusty disappeared, there is another monument for all the Allied Air Force crews who were killed or missing during World War II. Every year, Christine Stadden travels here to pay tribute to Rusty and to remember the young Canadian prairie boy who stole her heart.